Well, thanks for the invitation. I'm really delighted to be here. And I want to bring the perspective of the environment and the perspective of indigenous peoples and the notions of sustainable development. First, how is this? The one on the right. Okay. So first it's important to go a little back in time and remember how the notion of sustainable development came into birth. And it was the first time that really was a global consensus about the limits of development. The realization that there were ecological limits, but also the realization that there was something wrong, that the development was not delivering. So it was a holistic critique of capitalist development and a search for alternative forms of development. And it was really important because in this search, for example, the notion of fairness became really important. The concept of intergenerational equity was coined. The fact that meeting the needs of current generations should not compromise the ability of future generations to do so. That was at the core of the definition of sustainable development. But also the addressing intra-generational inequalities in terms of gender, class, north, south. And in that search of alternative forms of development, it was more attention paid not only how we organize production differently, but how can we relate to each other differently? How can we relate to nature in a different way? And in that sense, attention was paid to indigenous peoples as a repertoire, as a resource that could teach us some lessons because they have been able to conserve the resources that they were using. So this paradigm of sustainable development somehow got distracted, so to say, with the new paradigm emerging in the 90s, the so-called neoliberalism or the market-led development, in which we went back to the old patterns of focusing too much on economic growth, modernization, westernization, and this increasing pressure on commoditizing labor and nature. So, so I want us to keep in mind that there are these two different paradigms. There is some tension between them. And of course, environmental issues didn't disappear from the agenda, but they were much more refocused on climate change. In terms of mitigation strategies, it was much more a reliance on market-led mechanisms, as we will see, like RED. And this also, of course, created new opportunities, but it was not the same kind of reflection that we had in the 80s when we were thinking about sustainable development in terms of looking new ways of doing things. There have been a lot of improvement, as some of you already addressed, in terms of international frameworks addressing human rights, gender rights, and also the rights of minority people and indigenous people. For example, the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in 2007, and also a lot of development organizations, including the World Bank and IFAD, or the Organization of American States, or the African Commission for Human Rights. They all have policies in place recognizing and protecting indigenous rights and different mechanisms. So this is a positive development. Also, democratic transitions provide an opportunity for constitutional reforms, like in the case of Brazil. So all these are new spaces for participation. But also we see a rise of new forms of global responsibility and concepts that were not there before, like the notion of global jurisdiction, the right to intervene when we see cases of genocide, for example. All these elements kind of contextualize and somehow limit the notion of national sovereignty. So something I want to throw that for discussion. But the most important is that development means different things for different people. So it's a very contested concept. So I want to talk a little about the relation indigenous people have with the state. Has not been a very happy one. It is estimated that there were from 4 to 6 million people at the time of the encounter with the Europeans, and that was reduced to 100,000 by 1950. So some people think it's one of the largest genocide in the history of humankind, due to killing, slavery, diseases. Also, it's a big ethnocide when we talk about forced assimilation imposed to indigenous people. So most of them retreat and escape to the north and east of Brazil, but the frontier keeps expanding. And we are in a situation now where most indigenous lands have claims for mining. So there is a very contested situation in terms of their territorial rights. When Brazilian got independence, it adopted the model of nation states, which is basically assuming that there is one nation within one state, as opposed to having a multicultural state that recognizes the coexistence of different nations, of different peoples. And this is really important because that explains why Brazil has made progress in terms of improving inequalities and other fields. It has remained very much hostile to indigenous peoples, and the policies have been quite racist, forcing assimilation. The so-called phrase of let's civilize them, that has been a constant in Brazil. So in that sense, the indigenous people have been excluded from the state. And the Amazon has been considered, still is considered by many as an empty space, a resource that needs to be developed by Brazilians, ignoring the territorial rights of indigenous people and the indigenous citizenship. So until 1988, indigenous people were considered minors without legal rights, according to the Indian Statute of 1973. Now, the new Constitution of 1988 really changed and recognized indigenous rights in terms of cultural rights, self-determination, and land rights. So it was a big victory, but it did not change the nature of the state. So it was like a temporary victory, and it didn't last in the sense that there has been a process of counter-reform, a series of modifications. The most important, the Executive Decree 1775, that provides legal mechanisms for non-indigenous parties to challenge the process of demarcation of the indigenous territory. That has, of course, we are talking about ranchers, loggers, miners, farmers, and that has produced a big slowdown of the process. At this point, more or less 50% of the indigenous territory has been in some form of recognition. And that opened also the door for hostilities and violence against indigenous people. Evictions, murders, invasion, detention, and that has even also led to collective suicide, auto-despair. So I have no time, but these are some examples how at different stages the indigenous people of recognition of their lands, they're facing the situation is really very serious. It's almost like the wild, wild west. It's a situation with a lot of violence and a lot of instability. So the Brazilian Amazon is very important, not only for indigenous people and for Brazilians, but for the rest of the planet. It represents a third of the remaining forest in the world. It holds 60% of the total carbon stored in the biosphere, and that, together with the reflexivity and evapotranspiration, regulates climate and water cycles in the region and beyond. It supports rich biodiversity and is the homeland of indigenous people. Brazil is one of the 5th most rich countries and is the 4th largest emitter of dioxide of carbon. And basically because of deforestation, because as our panelists said, really they have a very amazing clean energy policy. But deforestation accounts for 80% of the emissions that Brazil produces. So these are the same activities causing deforestation, like cattle ranching, mining, dam construction, agribusiness, are those who encroach and threaten indigenous lands. For example, there was a study conducted on deforestation in the states of Mato Grosso, Rondônia, and Pará, showing 10 to 20 times less deforestation occurring within indigenous lands and protected areas as compared to adjoining lands. So it seems to be clear that most indigenous land consists of pristine forests, showing the sustainable use that this population has been able to conduct through centuries. And there seems to be a clear confluence of interest between protecting the Amazon and protecting indigenous land rights. Now, lately there are new opportunities for using REDD for the Amazon, since deforestation, forest degradation, reforestation, and afforestation are included in the REDD and REDD Plus. Just to make the thing simple for those of you who are not familiar, REDD is about reducing emissions coming from deforestation and degradation, and basically paying for people who are able to keep the forest, providing some monitoring and some proof that they are doing so. Brazil is becoming a world leader in developing REDD Plus at the national and subnational frameworks level. However, there is a lot of concern of what are the REDD implications for indigenous people in a context where their land rights are not really being secured. So these are risks and opportunities. In terms of risks, the most obvious is that by increasing the value of the forest, you might foster more land grabbing. The second is that there might be some limits to the use of traditional use of the forest that might erode the livelihoods and culture of indigenous people and increase their dependency on external supplies. Poaching, the most obvious, comparing $1 per hectare versus $1,000 for logging, mahogany, for example, which is illegal, but still people do it. Also problems qualifying for REDD, because it is targeting forests that are at immediate risk, and indigenous lands are the least threatened by deforestation, so some people worry that this could provide some perverse incentives. The benefits are obviously getting some income, preventing further deforestation, and for indigenous communities it could allow them to afford health and education services that are currently not being provided by the state. It could create synergies to support and protect indigenous land rights. But the bottom line is that without security, securing indigenous rights and reinforcing, there is no real benefit or not clear benefits. So the question is, can the frontier, can we settle the frontier? Can we really protect indigenous rights and keep loggers, ranchers out? Last one. So what I want to bring here is the importance of realizing that there are ecological and social limits to development. The fragility of the Amazon ecosystem, there is heavy soil erosion after deforestation, the risk of droughts turning rainforests into savannas. In a scenario analysis, there is a risk of losing 43 species with only 1% of annual increase in carbon dioxide emissions. This system, the Amazon, performs very valuable global and local ecosystem functions, but is not suitable for mega development. But there are opportunities for small-scale sustainable activities that avoid deforestation. We have cases of extractive reserves of Brazil nuts and rubber taping, for example, that have been very successful, or for ecotourism. Important to remember that the Amazon is not an empty space. So the issue of demarcation of indigenous lands is really a very important issue because it's their homeland and they have been proved to be sustainable stewards of these lands. Now, however, usually when there is discussion about the Amazon, not only in Brazil, but in Peru, in other countries, the issue of national interest is being raised. So what I want here to question is, what is this thing of national interest? Who are being represented and who are not being represented in these nation states? Because one of the agreements or one of the protections of indigenous rights is the fact that they have the right to self-determination, the right to prior consent, that they can, no policies affecting them should be formulated without their not only consultation but also participation. So the question is, what is about the protection of the Amazon is an issue of national sovereignty, is an issue where outsiders can step in. What is the ethics of the decision beyond this? Who has the right and whose voices and whose vision of development are going to be represented in that discussion? Okay, I know it's quick, it's imperfect, but it's a starting point for discussion. Thank you.